Hey everyone, we are going to be reading chapter 7 of Peppermints in the Parlor. It is called Peppermint Peril. It was 2 days later when Tilly announced that she was going to be taking shopping with Mrs. Meaching. Yours aunt's gonna be busy baking cakes, so I gets to help Mrs. Meaching buy the groceries, said Tilly proudly. She sounded as if she were actually going to have an opinion sought in selecting strawberries out of season, the limes and the lettuces, instead of merely going along to serve as a beast of burden weighed down with Miss Meaching's packages. And since I hasn't the time to dust the parlor, Tilly was all importance this morning, you gets to do it today, Emily. To Tilly, dusting the parlor was clearly an honor, not to be bestowed on just anyone except in cases of direst emergency, or, as in the present instance, simply if something better came along. She handed Emily a rag and flounced off to prepare herself for her big excursion, leaving Emily alone in the parlor. Well, not quite alone, because of course there were some of the old people in the room as well. From having cleaned their rooms, Emily could now attach names to several of the sad, wrinkled faces. Mr. Bottle and his handkerchief were in the parlor. So was Mr. Popple, with all ears so big and thin that you could see light through them. Also present was Mrs. Biggs, who still wore spectacles, stiff as a cat's whiskers perched on her nose, even though the glass in them had long since been lost or stolen. But for all useful purposes, such as conversation or company, Emily was alone. And though Tilly might have numbered dusting the parlor with other treasured gifts from her gracious benefactors, Emily didn't see it all in the same light. She did not like being in the parlor on her own and wanted to get the chore done as quickly as possible. It was very quiet in the room, so very dim, so very frightening to be stared at by unseen faces, and to be in the presence of two doors closed like lids over baleful eyes, doors that could spring open at any moment, except for an occasional honk from Mr. Bottle, who sat hunched in a chair to one side of Mrs. Meaching's closed door. The parlor remained deadly silent as Emily's dust rag raced over the tables. She had gone no more than halfway around the room when suddenly Mrs. Meaching's door swung open. Emily gasped, her hand frozen in midair as Mrs. Meaching appeared dressed for shopping in a black coat and hat that made her look strangely like a snake attempting to masquerade as a lady. She hurried silently across the parlor and climbed the stairs towards Mrs. Plumley's room, but in her hurry she had left behind an open door. Through it, Emily could see blood-red carpet and heavy blood-red velvet drapery shrouding the windows, and furniture that gave the impression of being dark, oversized headstones. Then all at once the silent parlor was scattered with an explosion of sound. Kerchoo! It was Mr. Bottle sneezing. He dove into the pocket of his sweater to retrieve a rag that passed for his handkerchief, and plop, along with the handkerchief, a peppermint flew out of the pocket and fell onto the floor. But instead of stopping where it fell, it went rolling and rolling and rolling. It did not stop until it reached the dead center of Mrs. Meaching's carpet, where it lay blinking like a knowing, wicked red and white eyeball. "Come and get me," it taunted. "Anyone who dares." Thoughts, each one more chilling than the one that came before it, darted through Emily's head. Mr. Bottle clearly had not seen or heard the peppermint fall. She could tell him about it, and no doubt have Mr. Bottle instantly dead with fright lying on the parlor floor. If Mrs. Meaching saw the peppermint upon her return, she would immediately suspect one of the old people, and the most likely culprit would be Mr. Bottle, since he was nearest to the door. There would be only one thing to be done, and that was for Emily to go get the peppermint. Dropping the rag on the nearest table, she flew swiftly to the open door. Then, with her breath as solid in her throat as a lump of moldy bread, she tiptoed into the dreaded room. And then she froze. In that deathly silent parlor, any sound could be heard, but most especially the sound of footsteps. Mrs. Meaching, having completed her business with Mrs. Plumley, was on her way back to her room. There was another door in that room closed, and 2 large wardrobes also with doors closed, but it was already firmly implanted in Emily's mind that closed doors at Sugar Hill Hall were to be avoided like the plague. Besides, with Mrs. Meaching's breath practically felt in the room, there was no time to play musical doors. And then she saw the hiding place that offered her one slim hope. Scooping up the peppermint, she slipped behind the blood-red velvet folds of the draperies. It was, however, a surprisingly noisy, rough Mrs. Meaching that entered the room. Clash, clash, bang! Emily heard what sounded like logs tumbling into the fireplace, and there was a voice that came with them. Ouch! Well, if that ain't the catfish whiskers, as Pa always said. A blamed splinter. Ouch, ouch. The voice belonged to the fishmonger's son. Good, thought Emily. Serves him right. But she was still frightened. This was not Mrs. Meaching. But how much better was Kipper? After the way he behaved in the kitchen with Tilly, thinking he would relish turning Emily over to Mrs. Meaching. If he would hurry with his logs and leave Emily so Emily could escape to the parlor. But he was still dawdling with them when Mrs. Meaching returned. How dare you enter into my room without permission? She hissed at him with a voice stiff with rage. Well, the door was open, Mum, and I wanted to get the logs built so you could have a nice fire roaring before you got back. Kipper was using the same brand of oil he had applied to Tilly. Oh, I suppose that's all right, but see you don't do it again. Oh, no, Mum, said Kipper earnestly. For a few moments there was only the sound of wood being knocked against wood and a drawer sliding open and shut. Then suddenly Miss Meaching said sharply, What was that? What was what, Mum? That sound. I heard something drop. Something had indeed dropped. The peppermint from Emily's hand. It fell right by her feet, but unfortunately just beyond the edge of the velvet drapery for the whole room to see, if it looked in the right place. I didn't hear anything, Mum, said Kipper. I expect it were a bit of wood falling. Nonsense. I heard something. Suspicion oozed from every letter of the word. Then logs clattered noiselessly from the fireplace, and Mrs. Meaching hissed her displeasure. Sorry about that, Mum, Kipper piped up. Oh, never mind, snarled Mrs. Meaching. But as long as I must put up with us, there are a few words I've been meaning to have with you. She lowered her voice. Have you met that orphan brat that's come to live? Yes, Mum. I met the skinny little thing in the kitchen the other day. Ain't worth much, I'd say. Quite right, Kipper. I'm only keeping her here out of the kindness of my heart to please Mrs. Lecocq. But I'm afraid Emily isn't to be trusted. Do you understand my meaning? Oh, yes, Mum, said Kipper soulfully. Well, there was a long pause filled with meaning. What I want you to do, is keep an eye on her, wherever you are here. Report to me if you catch her doing anything suspicious, snooping about, as it were. If you do, there's a packet of peppermints in it for you. Yum, yum, said Kipper. Ah, I see you'd like that, eh? Yum, yum. That's right, rub your stomach. Well, come to me with a report, and you shall have one. Oh, thank you, Mum. Yum, yum. Well, that's settled then. Now, aren't you finished with that fireplace yet? I'm not done yet, Mom, but if you ain't got cause to worry, I'll just finish up and close the door, shut up tight when I go. You must do more than that, Kipper. You must fetch Mrs. Plumley to lock up. Yes, Mom, I'll do that all right. Yes, Mom. That's a good boy. Kipper's oily performance was clearly having its effect on Miss Meaching. A few moments had passed, and then with a start she realized the room had suddenly become very quiet. Had Kipper already gone for Miss Plumley? With one trembling finger, Emily pushed the red velvet aside an inch. She found herself staring right into a pair of blue, scowling eyes. See here, ain't you got more sense than to come snooping around the snake pit? Ain't you aware the snake lady eats folks 5 times your size for breakfast? And lastest, but not far away, not leastest, seems to me you dropped something. Kipper opened up a stern hand to reveal the offending peppermint. Here, Emily. Yum, yum. I'm curious if you guys think that Kipper is to be trusted. or not? What do you think Emily should think of him? I will see you guys soon. Bye.